In a slayer's search for a valiant end, only glory was found. As Malakai's relentless resolve soars, his feats enter the dwarven halls of legend. With redemption as his compass, he charts once more towards his next deadly venture.
Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about Malakai Makaisson in Total War Warhammer 3, Thrones of Decay, patch 5.0, and why I think he is genuinely the best legendary lord in the game. Now, being the best doesn't mean he's the most powerful. I think Orion would like to have a word with him about that. But Orion being powerful, or the Changeling being powerful, or Archaon being powerful doesn't mean that they're fun. Doesn't mean that they're interesting to play. Doesn't necessarily mean they're interesting characters. See, Malakai has a combination of things that makes him both very interesting as a character, very interesting to play, and certainly very powerful in a campaign. For starters, he has the Spirit of Grungni as a horde army attached to him. You can gain this if you confederate them, by the way, because that's not his unique faction mechanic. This is a lord effect. So you get the horde army attached to him that gives him various benefits. And you can also recruit Ulrika if you're playing this particular campaign, which is something I believe that the other dwarves can't get. All you need to do is get the shooting gallery over here, and once you do, and also get 15,000, you will get Ulrika as event. So you still need to get 15,000 gold to get access to her. But again, that's the least interesting aspect about him. He does certainly have a cool model, and he does have a cool voice actor. His lines are fairly awesome to begin with. And he is an absolute ranged beast in combat. Like, even right now, on turn 12 in this campaign, he's already at the point where he's already doing 2k damage with his weapon. And because of the way ranged combat works, in general, in 5.0, you will encounter many battles where Malakai will just start shooting in a battle, and he will never stop doing significant damage in return. His skill line is pretty good as well. Engineers, recruitment, various benefits, but it's not that which makes him so very interesting. It's none of that. See, in most campaigns in the game, you have 2 or 3 mechanics that you have to worry about, or 2 or 3 things you have to worry about. One is obviously dealing with your opponents and conquering territory. The second thing is some unique campaign mechanic. The third, also a unique campaign mechanic. Consider a campaign like Axiatl. Let's just go with that particular idea, because Axiatl has a very interesting campaign, one of the best. You have your regular territorial expansion, then you have your sanctums, and you also have your missions. So that's a fairly unique mechanic that does give him a lot of flexibility in a campaign, because you can teleport from his starting location to anywhere else on the map, and you have all climates available in this campaign. The sanctums that he also puts up also do make his campaign a bit more interesting, though I would say they're intrinsically tied to the missions. So really, you could argue Axiatl has kind of 2.5 mechanics, or even 2 mechanics, or 2 things that he has to deal with, 2 dilemmas. Malakai, as any dwarf, has 4, and that speaks to the strength of the dwarf faction rework. Because every single dwarf campaign in the game right now with 5.0 has to deal with the following. You have to take territory. You have to deal with the other legendary lords of the dwarves. The reason you have to deal with all the legendary lords of the dwarves is because you can confederate every single one of them for certain without the bullshit that you usually have to do for confederations, like discovering a distant faction, engaging in diplomacy in a cheesy way. You don't have to deal with that as any dwarf. So you have to take into concern, you have to worry about how well those legendary lords are doing in their campaigns, which means in every dwarf campaign, you're worried about the entire dwarven race. the major factions at the very least. Not necessarily the minor factions, that's more campaign specific, like Karak Azul as Forik, Karak Hearn as Belagar, and so on and so forth. But still, that is certainly a wonderful change that does add a lot more campaign flexibility. And Malakai is better in this than every other legendary lord of dwarves, with the exception of Ungrim and Grombrindal, though I would argue Ungrim is probably better in that respect, because of the climate situation. See, Malakai, like Ungrim and Grombrindal, has the frozen climate available. He doesn't have jungle, but that's not really too important in a campaign as Malakai, or in any Dwarven campaign, even as Forik, who does have jungle. And with Frozen, all of Nagrand, all of Norska, and all of Kislev is available for conquest. That presents so many opportunities in a campaign for territorial expansion and for being able to get things done in a campaign well, especially when you're thinking about overall territorial expansion, because it means when you're confederating Ungrim, confederating Grombrindal in particular, you're going to benefit from that quite a bit. On top of that, the third thing is the Age of Reckoning. So every dwarf campaign has to deal with an Age of Reckoning. You have to deal with the grudges that you can see that get added to this pool. That's a bit broken. Still, I was actually misreading it. I thought that was 3,000 notes, 4,300. That's far more reasonable. Still, so that's the third thing. The fourth thing that you do have to worry about is the legendary grudges. So these are objectives in a campaign that every dwarf can do. So every dwarf can worry about these, and all of these four elements combined, what they do is make dwarven campaigns inherently far more interesting in both early game and late game, or early, mid, and late game. I have found that with patch 5.0, dwarf campaigns just generally are the best campaigns to play because of those dynamics. Because a lot of campaigns in this game can start getting you can get into a position where you start to feel very bland after like turn 30 and 40. Now, maybe there's some AI changes in 5.0. They certainly haven't talked about it. There's probably going to be some changes with at least the Age of Reckoning with the full release version, though they haven't detailed that. There's a lot of things missing in the patch notes. Regardless of that, you do have those. And then there's the fifth thing that does apply to Malakai, and that is his quests, his adventures, because Malakai's campaign, what it is inherently, is really the adventures of Gotrek and Felix, though with an engineering twist to it. But it's going around the world dealing with various foes. So you get elves, or rather elven dragons, chaos dwarves, greenskins, vampires, malevolent treekin, so basically Draika, chaos, and Skaven. And the Skaven battle, the Skaven grudge, is basically kind of a situation where it's basically a tank wall plot. His name isn't mentioned, but a Skaven trying to blow up a dwarf trading hub, a dwarf hold, with a big bomb, that's either a Claw or tank wall. Make your pick. And these are wonderful because they're objectives that you do. So for instance, the dragon stuff that I've done here, fight one battle with cavalry units in the army, fight 2 battles in a mountain climate and all that. What's great about this compared to, say, the Changeling, who also has an objective-based campaign, is that, well, unlike the Changeling, the Changeling had an interesting idea that with very, very poor execution. See, the problem with the Changeling is when you play him, you can't lose the campaign even if you try. It's really hard. The AI will not kill you. The second problem with the Changeling is that a lot of his objectives don't feel all that great to actually do. You may get some rewards, certainly very powerful rewards, but it's more of a grind than anything else. And it's quite interesting how Creative Assembly took something as awesome as the idea of, let's steal the Black Pyramid of Nagash and put it in Cafe. But because you're never at risk in that campaign, and also you don't have other dilemmas, there's genuinely no risk, the interest drops, and it kind of ends up being very gimmicky. Whereas in Malakai, you gain a lot of power, and it feels interesting. Like, the way these things work is when you start an adventure, you unlock certain units. The first one is going to give you cannons, so you get like free cannons that you can recruit for free in an adventure pool, adventure units, or gyrocopters, or goblin hewers, and all kinds of units, gyro bombers, goblin hewers, flame cannons, organ guns, and thunder barges. Thunder barges do require you to get 3 other adventures done, because being able to recruit thunder barges for free at like a 3,500 cost or something along those lines and get free units would be extremely overpowered in early game. Still, you do have a lot of flexibility in getting these adventures in whatever way you want, with the exception of the Skaven one. The Skaven one just requires you to get 3 others done. You'll do the elf one pretty quickly, and then you'll get various adventures with various objectives. You only need to do 3 or 4 objectives of the top, the ones mentioned here, but generally speaking, they're basically involving taking those units you just unlocked and using them in battle, essentially. And that's great. That's the great thing about this compared to the Changeling, because it's just like, oh, here's these units. Use them. Play the campaign. Do things that you normally would do, and we're just going to spice it up and give you some dilemmas that you may have, some story choices with potential rewards. And also, if you go to a location, and also on top of that, if you just don't have an enemy of a particular race, we're going to spawn rogue armies like Skaven, elves, etc. in a certain region to help you out in terms of dealing with these. They won't spawn forever, by the way. They won't spawn infinitely. Once you get that particular objective completed, the spawn points will disable. This all combined, as well as the level of power that these units get, like consider cannons, right? Over here, I've gotten grape shot for cannons, I've gotten reload time reduction, unit experience, some treasury, like some objectives just give treasury, but there's also recruit rank. And if we look at, gyrocopters, we can get missile strength, vanguard deployment, missile block chance. So it really adds a lot of variety to your armies with mechanical units. That's what this campaign is focused on. It pushes you to utilize these more. It gives you more variety of recruitment, which is already increased in the Dwarven campaign substantially, because due to the fact a lot of Dwarven units have been made far easier to recruit, like Iron Drakes are tier 2, Thunderers are tier 2, cannons, grudge throwers still tier 2 of course, but you're no longer just using quarrel or grudge thrower armies as you were before. That's part of the intrinsically part of the dwarf rework. But Malakai gets even more variety than all the other dwarves do. And when you put all of this together, as well as just the massive hero squad you have, you start with Gotrek and Felix, you get Garagrim pretty early on. Only Malakai and Ungrim can get Garagrim fairly quickly in a campaign. Both of them can start, well, Malakai actually a bit slower than Ungrim. It won't be a problem, like I won't unlock him if you can unlock him. So you can take your time in other campaigns, but just being able to get this powerful legendary hero squad so early on in a campaign is in itself very, very powerful. And combined, all of these things put together with the dwarf rework makes for a wonderful campaign experience. And I would certainly recommend to people that are interested in Thrones Decay that you play this campaign. I think it's the most enjoyable campaign that Creative Assembly has ever designed in any of their games. I think the Dwarf rework is one of the best reworks that they've ever made, probably the best rework, because of the way it incentivizes different styles of gameplay and the dilemmas that get created because of that gameplay, and the adventures are genuinely fun, unlike many other objective-based campaign mechanics that Creative Assembly has tried to put in their games before. They really went all in this DLC. Tamarkan is a pretty fun character, Elspeth less so, but she does have powerful campaign mechanics. That's all I had to say for now. There's a review that I did actually a couple of hours ago and stuck in processing hell on YouTube. Hopefully it will be available soon. But for a moment, all I can say is Malakai, really worth playing. DLC is great, highly recommended. Stay tuned for more.